Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and I'm joined again by Nick. Hey, Nick, welcome back.
For having me. Glad to be back.
I am so excited for today's podcast, and I think everyone should be as excited as I am because today we have on Beth Diamond. And, Beth is just a dynamic individual, and, she just, I don't even know how I can even describe how she encompasses warmth and growth and just positivity as to the insurance industry. And she started in as a lawyer and worked at a law firm for many years, and then switched over to insurance, not even intending to go to insurance, which I think is a story that a lot of us can relate to as well. But she's coming and talk a lot about cyber, a lot about artificial intelligence, things that we are hearing a lot about these days. And Nick, I know you're all in on cyber and you're very knowledgeable about it. So one of the main reasons I wanted you to join me, other than you're a lovely co-host. But with that, let's bring her in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good afternoon, Beth. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you.
Meghan, thank you for inviting me, and I'm really excited for this. I'm a newbie at these podcasts, so hopefully this will be entertaining for all.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is your very first podcast, so hopefully I don't ruin the whole experience for you, but I don't think I will.
I'm confident in your expertise.
I've yet to ruin it for anybody, so you better not be my first. And I'm so happy to have Nick back as my co-host today. It's been a hot minute since Nick's joined me on a podcast, so welcome back.
This is my third, so not a rookie.
All right.
Yes.
Nick's experience, third one.
This might be my, 300th maybe. I don't know. Not of Claims Never Sleep, but of podcast episodes that I have hosted. I think I might be definitely over 250. I think so. Woohoo! So anyway, so Beth, on this podcast, we talk about all things claims and claims adjacent, and we have on, attorneys and claims associates and people of all sorts that handle claims or defense litigation and everything. But what I find really interesting is hearing about how people got to where they are, because everyone's story is so different and unique. And I say this, I'm so sorry for everyone who listens, because I say it every single time. I don't even care if no one wants to hear this. I do. So, so everyone who listens has to hear your story. But, how did you decide to go to law school? Was it something that, your parents had instilled in you, or is it just something you fell into? Like, I completely fell into this. So I'm curious what your path was.
Yeah, so for me, I think I've always wanted to be an attorney since I was young. And I don't remember this, but my parents would always tell me that when my dad would get home after a day of work and we'd all sit down to have dinner together, he would sort of relay how his day went, and I would just ask a lot of probing questions. And my parents would just laugh and say, "Oh, you really should just be a lawyer because you've just cross-examined your father on his day." And so I think it's just somewhat innate to my personality. And I did go to law school. I did work at a large international firm for almost 12 years before I joined Beasley. And I did commercial litigation, complex commercial litigation, which I loved. I think most people like to have a specialty and be a specialist when it comes to an area of litigation. I loved being a generalist. So I really bucked that trend. I really liked to dabble in a lot of things. And that's because for me, what I really loved about litigation was helping people find a solution to their problem. And I think typically litigation ends with one person winning, one person losing, and whoever won money, right? And I don't think that money is always the right solution or the best solution to a problem. So I would always look as a litigator to how I could help them build or create something new. Now, sometimes money is the only way to provide somebody relief, But when there was an opportunity to do something different, I always look for that. And an example of that, one of the matters I worked on just before I left my law firm and joined Beasley was there was an arbitration between two very large pharmaceutical companies. They had created a joint venture to create a new pharmaceutical product. It did not get FDA approval. And so the arbitration was this argument. Whose fault was it? So who owed who money? And we put a lot of work into it. There was a lot of math involved and a lot of science. So I loved it because I love math. I love science, which also set me apart for the most part as an attorney. And I just sat down and I said, we're going to keep fighting this fight, or the two of you can dream up a new project to work on together. And isn't that the better way to proceed? And ultimately, we did settle the case by the two parties forming a new joint venture and working on a new pharmaceutical product together. And it was a much better way than these two big behemoths fighting about, for them, what was really a lot of money, but for us, but for them was a trivial amount of money, right? And so I really love being able to counsel. I think that counseling part, that problem solving, that creative solution finding part, to me was always the most interesting part of being a lawyer. You don't always get to do it, but that's what I loved about it the most. And so it's a very natural segue, a lot of ways, into claims for me, because again, it's about creative problem solving. It's about finding solutions, and it's about counseling people at the end of the day, listening empathetically, hearing them objectively, responding to what they have to say, and helping them and you together, working with them, find a creative outlet, a creative way to solve their problem. And sometimes it's just money, but other times there's other ways to do it. And people just need to think broader than just monetary damages sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it is the problem solving business, right? Like I mean, the courts are, honestly, they're there to solve people's problems when they can't solve it any other way. The judge or the jury, the trier of fact, decides. If you can't solve your problem, they're going to do it for you.
It's absolutely true. And I think, when a judge or a jury comes out with a decision, it's very black and white. Somebody wins and somebody loses. And I always think there's some medium, find, right? There should be a medium way to find something. And my dad used to always say, as a practicing attorney, the best settlements are when everyone's unhappy, because that means that there's a certain amount of fairness to it all. Nobody really won big, but nobody really lost big. And so that's always in the back of my mind, of trying to devise a solution that ultimately has people feeling like, well, this is fair, right? It may not be as big as I want or the way I want, but it's fair. And like that fairness aspect really means a lot to me on a personal level.
Yeah. So wait, did you say that your father was an attorney, or is an attorney as well?
He's passed, but he was an attorney. Yes.
Did he do? Did that like kind of influence you a little bit? Because you were saying like when you come home, you'd ask him all of these questions about his day. Was that kind of like one of get in the forefront of your mind of like, this might be a career path that you wanted to go on?
It definitely influenced me, right? So at the time, it was probably really subconscious, but it absolutely influenced me. And it's so my childhood best friend, her dad was a psychiatrist, and she's become a psychiatrist. So I definitely think that we were very influenced by the career paths of our fathers. And this was all before the take your daughter to work day phenomenon, but we were each individually involved quite heavily with things, going to work with our fathers and having that experience. So I do think that it did influence me, and I think it influenced her as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, my dad owned car dealerships. And I mean, I didn't follow in the family footsteps there, but I do remember, working at his dealerships during like the summer, like answering the phones. And I remember the first time I answered the phone, it was someone calling for him. And over the loudspeaker, I was like, "Dad, you have a call on like line so-and-so." And like one of the managers came running over to me like, "No, when we're here, you refer to him as Mr. Flavin." I was like, "But it's my dad." I was like, okay. It was such a weird phenomenon for me.
It's funny. And even though you didn't go into car dealerships, you learned about customer service and
Yes.
communicating with different people with different backgrounds and different, needs or demands. And so think about how you've turned that into what you do with your podcast, because
Yeah.
Nick may be experienced, but you're a pro, right? If you've done more than 250 of these, you are a pro.
I try. Although I try. So, when you were, oh, go ahead.
Was your father also a litigator, Beth?
He was a litigator. So he started off at a large firm doing corporate work, but he went into litigation. And for me, I knew I always wanted to be in litigation. So I did get an opportunity. Oops, I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Oh, I said me as well.
I really, I always wanted to be a litigator, but I had the opportunity when I was practicing law to be able to advise on some corporate deals where there was pending litigation. And part of what they wanted to understand is what was my view of that litigation? How long did I think it might go on? What might be the, possibility of the different variables of outcomes, and what might it cost? Because if a company was purchasing, acquiring another company, and they might end up then acquiring that litigation, they wanted to have an understanding of how to value that and what kind of resources it might require if they were to take it on. So I had the opportunity to sometimes weigh in as a litigator on corporate deals.
And that's interesting too, because that's not an opportunity that a lot of people get, and because the corporate side of the legal world for a lot of litigators is so foreign, like even like some of the documents, it's kind of outside of a lot of our wheelhouse. So then I think that probably made you really, really attractive though, when you left private practice and you kind of had both sides on like under your belt, because then you can evaluate the litigation side, but also you have you're comfortable with the corporate background as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a great opportunity for me because I'm a very curious person. So I like to be doing something and learning something all of the time. I'm definitely not the kind that wants to push paper around on a desk. I really want to be learning. I'm very curious. And so for me, it was really great to have that opportunity to have exposure to those corporate deals and to be able to use my litigation training and experience to help companies determine if this was the right valuation for them, in terms of you're not just buying the assets, you're buying the liabilities as well. And what did that mean when it came to pending litigation, particularly anything of note, right? So some things can get resolved, but some things are more fundamental to a company, particularly if it involved like intellectual property rights and things of that nature. That's quite fundamental to the valuation of the corporate assets as well.
Yeah.
12 years in private practice, what made you motivated you to make the switch going into the insurance industry?
Yeah. So Nick, I only ever worked on one matter when I was in private practice that involved insurance. And it was a directors and officers matter. And I was representing the directors and officers against their carrier. It was quite funny because when I got the role at Beasley, somebody senior from the claims organization of that insurance carrier, was not Beasley, came over to me and said, "Oh, I remember you from this case." And I was like, but I didn't have much experience in insurance. And it got to a place where I had decided that the handwriting was on the wall for me in terms of the financial viability of the organization I was a part of. And I had been told for every year at my appraisal, you're on partnership track, it's going to happen for you. And they just kept extending. And that there came to an appraisal where they said, "You're on partnership track. We don't want you to leave. We really value you. But, we're not doing that well financially. It might be 2 years. It might be 5 years." And I walked out of there thinking, like, I don't want to be on this for another 2 or 5 years. Because when you get to that level, that senior level where you're working for partnership, it's so all encompassing. And I thought, I'm not doing this for another 2 to 5 years. And by the way, I can see the handwriting on the wall in terms of the viability here. So I started looking for something else. And at the time, I was interviewing at other large firms in New York City, and I was interviewing at investment banks. So I was quite down the road interviewing at investment banks, and I was at an offer with a large international law firm in New York. And it was to be senior counsel with a 2-year partnership track. So I was sort of at the end of my process when I get a phone call, because the recruiter I was using for the investment banks was hired by Beasley to look to hire the first claims professional in the US for Beasley. And I get a phone call and I say, I'm so sorry, I'm quite embarrassed. The recruiters really misled you. I just don't know anything about insurance. I'm not your person, click. And they called back again. And I just said, no, I'm so sorry. I'm not your person. I really don't know anything about insurance, click. And they call back a third time a week later and they say, don't hang up. We don't want somebody who knows about insurance. We want somebody who has been in the role of defense counsel for companies like our insurance, because we want somebody who can really partner with our insurance and their defense counsel and work together to get to the best outcome. And I said, oh, well, that's quite interesting. Tell me more. And so I engaged in this conversation and I decided this was really an interesting opportunity. I went for my interview with Beasley and I thought, wow, they're really kicking off something big. They were starting these US operations. I would be the first claims hire in the United States. I'd be the first Beasley hire in New York. I'd open the New York office. And I thought, this is super entrepreneurial, which was really interesting to me. And I thought, like, when do litigators get to be entrepreneurial? We're used to like ripping things down. We don't get to build new things. So I thought, this is really interesting. So I followed up. I went for the further interviews with Beasley. And when I got the offer, I thought, now I have to decide, I have large international law firm, the thing I know I'm so comfortable with, investment bank, and I have this offer from Beasley. And I decided to take the leap of faith and go with the Beasley offer. So that's how I ended up in insurance. And it's funny because in the beginning, I thought I must have been crazy when I made this choice. But 18 and a half years later, I'm still here. It's been a fantastic opportunity for me. And I have a huge amount of respect for the industry in a way that as an outsider, I never would have appreciated what this industry is really about. And I think the industry is incredible. I think the insurance industry provides a lot of risk mitigation solutions to companies that really enable them to do what they're there to do, right? It really enables business. And I think it really, in an ever-increasing world of risk, in a place where there's just ever-increasing challenges that all companies face, I think insurance is an amazing solution. And as an industry, I've always found people are incredibly loyal to one another, and it's a great place to have a career. And I never, ever would have thought it until I was a part of it. So I'm really grateful that Beasley was so persistent and kept calling me.
I know.
I went to talk to them, that I was intrigued by the entrepreneurial side, and I ultimately took the leap of faith. It's all been a great, great experience.
Well, that has come a long way in a relatively short period of time, right? You said 18 years, so you joined about 2006 then, right? I
did in January of 2006.
Wow, I mean, it's amazing. I've worked with Beasley in the past, so I'm a bit biased, but I loved working with the company. And can you talk a little bit about, in that short period of time, how far Beasley has come in the US? What are some of the successes that they've had, and maybe lessons along the way that you all have learned that led to that success or those achievements?
Yeah. So, Beasley itself was obviously quite well established in the London market. Its foundings as a Lloyd's syndicate, traded on the London Stock Exchange. So, it had a great foundation, but it decided to navigate into the US market, and it bought a shell company that had the licensing in all 50 states. And it really kicked off operations. And probably best, I didn't really appreciate this at the time. It was all a bit of an experiment. The Brits weren't really sure it would work out, but it's been a smashing success for them. And I'm glad that I was sort of there at those earliest days, because it's been a great ride. And we started off in the US really with a focus of hiring a lot of very senior, experienced people, because there was a consciousness that you're going to have this growing team to grow a business on the other side of the Atlantic. So you needed people who had the leadership and experience to do that. and also who were so senior that they were just excited to build something new rather than worrying about, ladder climbing for titles, because Beasley has always been quite a non-hierarchical company, right? So we have an operational structure because we're big. We need to have an operational structure, but we've always had a non-hierarchical mindset from the earliest days. And I think when you bring in senior people, they've already accomplished so much, so they don't have to worry about the ego thing. And we were all just fixated on this excitement of building something. And it was really an amazing ride. And I'm really proud that I got to be a part of that. I got to open the New York office for Beasley, which is now a flourishing, beautiful office, which you can see some of the beauty behind me. But, we have over 100 people here in New York. And once upon a time, it was just me. So it was me with one of those 1970s microwave dinner tables that you would do the fold out. So I would get up in the morning, I would unfold the table, I'd put my laptop on top, and I'd get rolling. And I'd just sit on the edge of my bed working on the laptop on this little table until we had an office. So I'm quite proud of where we've gotten to. But Beasley as a company has really grown and matured. We've gone from sort of not being on anybody's radar to really being a player in the specialist areas where we really focus. And in the early days, I was placed onto a team at the time was called Technology and Miscellaneous. And it's now our cyber and technology team. So we were this little tiny, about a 35 million excess playbook at the time. It was really like a speck on the screen. And now our cyber practice is something we are renowned for. It's worth into the billions of dollars in terms of the revenue of it. It's just a really incredible, mature, and market-leading practice. And so it was really exciting to be part of the early days. And there was something when I started in claims that I started to do. So we would have these large E&O clients, and they would do things like background checks or processing medical invoices and things of that nature. And so sometimes they would have breaches of their clients' information. And so in the early days, they didn't know what to do with that. This was all very novel, very new. It's before it's so known now and so understood in the US. In the early days, nobody really knew what to do with that. And they would call up because we have claims made and reported coverage. So they would want to tell us about it. But all of these companies had large retentions, $1 million, $2.5 million, $5 million. So they would call me as a matter of precaution to notify, but they weren't really looking for any help. And I would say, well, gee, I'm really interested in this area. This goes back to that curiosity person that I am. I'm really interested in this area and I'd love to help you out, right? I'm sure this loss is going to stay within your large retention, but I really want to give you the quality of service that you've bought when you bought your products from Beasley. And so I would work with these insureds. And it was really interesting because at the time they would call to get credit monitoring and it was all crisis management. So they'd get, we're going to give you a special price of $200 a code. And of course the insureds didn't know any better. And they'd be, oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And they would tell me, and I would say, are you okay if I make a phone call? Because I might be able to get you a better rate than that. And they'd say, sure. And I'd call up and I'd say, oh, you just spoke to company ABC and you quoted them $200 a code. Well, they're a Beasley insured. And actually, I'll take that $99 code price that you quoted me last week for company 123. And they're, and so what I was doing was really helping insureds navigate how to respond to a breach in a period of time when it wasn't so formulaic. People didn't know what to do. And I helped them save a lot of money, all within their retentions, right? So Beasley didn't, benefit financially from it in that direct sense. But what it built was an expertise, and what it built was a loyalty with brokers and insurers who were like, this is an incredible value add. Beth just saved us $250,000, $400,000, right? It was a lot of money, that hundreds of thousands of dollars that these companies were saving as a result of my involvement, as well as me helping them navigate to talk to people who were truly expert in the field then, because everybody had their 50-state survey that they had some summer associate put together. And I was able to say, yeah, everyone has their glossy brochure, but these people really know what they're talking about. And insureds loved it, brokers loved it. And ultimately, Mike Donovan, who was then the underwriter who led our then We called it TMB at that time. So it was Technology, Media, and Business Services. We left off the S because TMBS didn't sound right. So he had renamed Technology and Miscellaneous to TMB. And he said, gosh, you've really done something incredible here. I want to turn it into a product. And ultimately, I worked with Mike, and we turned what I was doing in servicing insureds on these breaches into the Beasley Breach Response, the BBR product that really became the cornerstone of our cyber practice here at Beasley, the jewel in our crown, so to speak, of cyber. And I'm really proud of what we built there. And I was there in those early days. So back in the earliest days, I was the cyber claims manager and the cyber breach response, manager as well. And it was just me. I wore every hat. And now the teams are enormous. And I'm just really proud of the success. But it was really exciting for me to be on the forefront of all of that.
Yeah.
So, I've had some really special experiences at Beasley in terms of being one of these early adopters, helping Beasley grow into what it's become here in the US, and helping Beasley grow into what it's become globally in terms of a cyber leader. So we definitely punch above our weight in terms of our specialism and our expertise. And I'm really proud of what I was able to contribute to that.
Well, and it was just such individualized customer service.
Yeah, well, and that goes to me for like part of my training, right? Which is that listening, that empathetic listening. And I think there's a difference between hearing and listening, and I really listen to hear. I don't just listen to nod my head. And I think that individualized approach really connects with the person who's in that moment of panic, because even now, even in an area where it's quite mature and people are much more educated on the process of how to deal with a cyber incident, even, people just still have that panic mode, right? It's still crisis management, and they need somebody who's going to be calm, cool, collected, who's going to help them navigate, shepherd them through what is a challenging situation for any organization.
Yeah.
So I worked with Beasley's breach response services. We would always describe it as there was a tech arm, right? You were doing both at the time, but there's a tech person who's going to work with the approved vendors, and then there's also a claims manager assigned. But I was helping out with claims, and to your point, I always came away thinking, man, it feels so gratifying working with these people and feeling like you're helping them. You're really making a difference. You're kind of guiding them through and making sure they get the coverages that they're entitled to. And obviously there's a business purpose on your side as well. It reduces claims, it avoids business interruption, loss, that sort of thing. But at the end, that's really what they need in a cyber incident, is someone to kind of hold their hand and guide them through the process and put them in touch with the right people.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, and Nick, you're experiencing it today. So even where incident response has become quite mature, people are aware of the resources in the marketplace. Those early days where I was negotiating, $180 discounts per code don't exist anymore, because it's all on the internet. Everyone knows what you should be charged, right? So you don't get to sort of play that game any longer if you're providing the codes. But I think even now, even with companies that do those tabletop exercises that feel prepared for an incident, you're never really prepared for the crisis until it hits. And so having somebody who can help you navigate the crisis in that calm, collected way is important. And it was always important to me when I was on the front lines of that to share information, because I always felt that any company could make the best decisions for itself in terms of its own priorities if it had the best information, the most complete information with which to make those decisions. You don't want to make them out of panic. You want to make them out of information. And so it was always really important to me to be the one to provide that information to people. And I think one of the advantages you have, Nick, which you've probably experienced working with us, when you work with a company like Beasley that sees so much, right? You might be under attack by, this threat actor, but we've seen them 20 times before this week already, right? We can tell you what their MO is. We might tell you who might have the keys to decrypt. We might tell you what to be able to expect as we use somebody to help negotiate with the threat actor, et cetera. And those are the things that really matter, because in those moments of crisis, it's really quite disruptive to a company, right? A company is in business to do whatever it does, sell cars, make movies, whatever they're in business to do, distribute medical supplies, whatever it may be. But they're not doing any of those things because every bit of their company's focus and energy is redirected to deal with this cyber attack from this threat actor. And the faster that you can help them navigate that in a way that's compliant, that's safe, that allows them to proceed in a way that's going to be the right course for that organization, the better, right? Because it doesn't matter how much insurance you have, it's still incredibly disruptive to your company. And so having somebody to help you and reassure you early on, coverage is in place, you can move forward, we are going to pay, is really comforting. And I remember there was an incident early on in our BBR experience. We had a large hospital in California. And I got a call from them. They were experiencing an event. It was back in the early days. So somebody had stolen some unencrypted computers, right? I mean, it was just back in the day when that's what the big breach event was.
Yeah, most of the files are probably paper.
And somebody had stolen this unencrypted computer, and they were just in a panic. And I said, I spoke to them and I said, well, coverage attaches here. We're going to help you. And many years later, so we helped them with the breach. They did face some CMIA litigation, so California Medical Information Act, Confidential Medical Information Act litigation in California. And we supported them through that in terms of taking some really critical legal questions up to this, the highest court in California, which ruled in their favor, really kind of focusing the application of that law to where it was intended to be and not just to be abused in a very widespread way. And we finished that whole matter and it closed down. And I get a call from the general counsel of the hospital, and he just couldn't stop thanking me. And he said, I've been doing this job for over 30 years. I've never had somebody confirm coverage to me as quickly as you did. What you did enabled us to face this challenge in a way that allowed us to be ourselves, to carry on our mission, which is to be a hospital and serve the medical needs of the community. Well, we had to deal with this, and he was so thankful, and he put out a press release thanking me for this.
Really?
Which was amazing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he voluntarily did that. I didn't ask him to do that. And it was just really, as you say, Nick, a really personally rewarding experience to know that you had really done something to help an organization navigate the challenge and continue to do what it's doing, right? It's a hospital. It's there to provide medical services. It's not there to deal with a cyber incident. And yet it had to deal with that. It's not uncommon for medical organizations to have to deal with that. And I was just really pleased that I was able to support them and make them, not only did I support them, but they felt so supported. And that's what they were commenting on, is the experience they had working with me. And that's really rewarding. You just can't replace that with, something else. That was really meaningful to know that I had helped a hospital that's helped so many other people.
Right.
Yeah, and it's to give them the support that they need in a time of need. The other thing that I think Beasley and improved vendors, frankly, bring to it is instant credibility. So if you're dealing with a threat actor, and for example, in negotiations, a question we would always get from insureds is, well, what prevents this threat actor from just breaching me again tomorrow and encrypting my data? And the honest response is, well, there's nothing that prevents that. I mean, we can do our security measures, and we can kind of take an inventory and see what we can do to boost your protection. But if they were to do that, the people they're negotiating with will immediately know, hey, they've lost, I hate to say credibility, right? Because these are criminals. But there is a certain amount of that they lose credibility, and next time, maybe we don't negotiate with you.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just recreate data instead.
Yeah, Nick, you're so right, because it's this honor among thieves thing that
Right.
is a bit strange, but you've seen it, right, through, as things have morphed. So early on, it was the honor amongst thieves, right? They had to give you legitimate keys that would decrypt the system. They had to keep their word if they were going to destroy something that they did, because they knew, as you say, Nick, if they didn't, people wouldn't deal with them the next time. They wouldn't negotiate with them. They wouldn't pay them. So we've seen that morph. And I think there's some lessons that the bad guys, I'll say, have taken away from, not having the honor amongst thieves, realizing that that was something that was really keeping them from running. I mean, they're running their bad guy business, and that's what they do 24/7. And their bad guy business wasn't doing very well because there wasn't that honor. They weren't always giving working keys. They weren't always keeping their word about the reattack, et cetera. So it's quite interesting because you're right. You're really relying on the goodwill of the bad guys. But I think they've learned some lessons about why there's value for them in their bad guy operations to show that goodwill. But it is interesting. And I think one of the things we've been able to do, and I really credit the team that's doing this now, and it's not me any longer because I've moved into a different area, but the team is just incredible at helping people stay ahead, right? And it's always a challenge for the good guys to stay ahead of the bad guys, because the good guys' business is to run a hospital or run a car dealership or run a media company, right? It's not to just stay ahead of the bad guys on this. And the bad guys' business is only to figure out how they can infiltrate your system or use AI to create deep fakes to trick you into something, right? I mean, all these things are things that they're working on endlessly because that's their job. We use all of that learning, all of that intelligence we get from law enforcement and our own work to share with our insureds to make them stronger and better, and less likely to be the one to be attacked over a company that maybe hasn't taken as many steps. But nobody is ever without the risk of this. No matter how much you invest and how hard you work, we're all at risk of a cyber incident, because that's simply the business of the bad guys, and they work quite hard to keep their business going.
And it's quite incredible to me, though, how large their business is and how effective it is. And seemingly it seems like there's not much we can really do besides try to build up protections to it. I mean, and that's my naivety a little bit, but and on my end, that's kind of how they're just big and strong, and they have resources, and they're making a crap ton of money, and we just have to be better about protecting businesses against the attacks.
Yeah, it's going to be a forever challenge, Megan. And one of the things I saw as a bright light is, for a long time, I kept saying, where is the government, right? Where are the governments internationally in terms of fighting these crime rings? Because, ultimately, private businesses can only do so much. You need governments to really align in terms of this. And it was only after a Colonial Pipeline breach, which you may remember from a few years ago, where finally you started to really see the U.S. government get involved actively in a very public way of going after these folks. You do read every now and then about prosecution of some of these folks, which, I think is quite important. If the governments of various countries don't go after these folks, if they don't prosecute them, if they don't work together in a unified way, because these are international rings for the most part, right? You're not having little groups in the U.S. attacking U.S. companies. It's all coming from international places. Yeah. Everybody needs to work together, but we should, because this is really having an impact globally on economies, on companies, and on individuals. And it's really going to take the power of governments and the government's ability to prosecute to really rein in this stuff, because all we're doing is preventative, right? We're trying to keep the bad guys away, but it's really the governments that have the ability, the power to stop the bad guys in their tracks.
Yeah, but it seems like an impossible feat. It really does.
Well, and that's what those of us involved in the cyber universe of insurance will be employed for some time, because you're right. It is a challenge. And again, the companies with the strongest security that do the most still have vulnerabilities, right? So, it's important to be sophisticated. It's important to take those steps and those investments and those measures to secure your systems, to educate your employees, to do everything you can to prevent these attacks because they are so incredibly disruptive to your business, and there's no insurance to really take care of the reputational damage, and there's only so much you can ever buy for the business interruption side, et cetera. And there's only so much that insurers are willing to cover. So it doesn't even cover all of your losses regardless of amount. So I think at the end of the day, you've got to protect yourself, but it's never going to be a perfect world because, like I said, the bad guys, this is their business, and they invest 24/7 in running their business and keeping ahead of the good guys on the fight.
Yeah.
The response plan is so important, like you said, Beth. Having a plan in place, having a good carrier like Beasley there to help you guide you through the process, those are something that you just have to have that, because no matter how much security you have, there's still the chance that there could be a breach.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think having an incident response plan and doing those tabletop exercises, which are mock, cyber incident exercises, it's really important. You just can't practice enough for these kinds of things. These kinds of drills do matter because what they tend to bring out is, oh, we haven't really decided who's going to be in charge of this incident. Do we run it out of our general counsel's office? Do we run it out of our CFO's office? Do we run it out of IT? Like who owns this at the end of the day?
Yeah.
A lot of those questions no one thinks to answer them or even ask them organization of themselves until you start to practice it. And when we do these mock tabletop exercises, and Nick, I'm sure you've had this experience, all of a sudden you see everyone around the table is talking at the same time. And you're like, okay, who owns this? Who is the responsible party? And it's one thing to put it on paper. It's enough to see, does it work in practice, right? And I think that's really the challenge. That's where the tabletop exercises, these mock practices really do matter in terms of companies getting more comfortable with taking on the challenge of the need to deal with what is a crisis situation with incident response when you have a potential cyber incident ongoing within your company or your network.
What do you know about your managed service provider, your MSP? I mean, you're putting a lot of trust in someone that's handling all your data if you're outsourcing that. What do you know about them? Do they have an insurance policy? What's their plan? Who do you contact there if your systems go down? That's one in talking about that one, you can usually see internal people at the company kind of looking around saying, yeah, who is going to reach out to them? That's one that they didn't think about.
It's true. And they don't even think about those terms and conditions that they sign that ultimately will limit liability substantially. Yeah. So then you're relying on business goodwill that they'll do right by you and your company. And in a lot of those things, when you sign them, those contracts are very standardized. And you think, well, these are standard contracts, standard terms and conditions, and you sign away. You don't realize what that means until an event is occurring and you're dealing with it. And I think, oftentimes it's those dependent business interruptions. You rely on this provider. You have not had the event. The provider had the event, but now you are so reliant on them and they cannot provide you with that service. Do you have alternative ways to work yourself so that you can get around the disruption that such a key provider is experiencing? And I think there's just so many different facets to what a company has to think about in terms of that incident response planning. And that's where, again, those mock exercises, those tabletop exercises is what brings out those questions for organizations, for them to be like, oh, we never thought about that. And gee whiz, we do have to think about what is our business continuity if this key provider goes down for us.
I remember a few years ago, the Philadelphia court system had a cyber attack, and that was a nightmare for everybody because just from a practice standpoint, you're like, we can't, how do we file anything? And then it would be like, wait, my response is due on this date, but the court e-filing is down. So now do we have to go back to someone running over to the courthouse, to the prothonotary to paper file something? And the ripple effect of it outside of the network. And then just think about all, how there's sensitive filings and sensitive information and all these things. And it was a night, and it lasted a very long time. And I mean, as we all know, dealing with courts and prothonotary, they usually aren't the easiest to call up and ask questions and get answers.
And Megan, it's such a good example because you think about it, and there's kind of two things. One, public entities as a whole tend to have older systems. They tend to have less money to invest in security.
Mhm.
It makes them more vulnerable. And so that business interruption side, everybody experiences that, right? And you see that a lot when public entities are suffering from a cyber attack. They have less resources, they have less money, and they've had less money invested into protecting them in a way that is not completely disruptive. And I think that's something that's on the mind of a lot of folks when we think about, electric grids and just general infrastructure, right? But public entities have their own challenges. I think as well, there's a challenge for everybody as we move to so much computerization, so much reliance on technology and the digital automation. When those systems go down, we don't necessarily have the same people power. So
Yeah.
it's funny you bring it up. I remember, gosh, I'm really going to date myself here. I remember the days where you would go down and you would file a paper copy of a brief, and you had to have the stamp from the clerk, and you had an office of somebody who was the one who ran back and forth to the courthouse because
Yes.
you didn't file electronically. But those offices and all that staff don't exist anymore. So when something goes down in a way that we rely on technology, we rely on a digitalization, we don't necessarily have the ability to pick up so quickly and replace that with people power because we don't have the same size team. We don't have the same types of people with the same types of learnings because we've just phased those things out because we've replaced them with electronic filing for courts,
Yeah.
for example. Yeah.
I remember that's probably not even a position at law firms anymore. When we had runners, like college kids who they probably don't even have them anymore.
No, definitely not. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is totally sidetracking, but think about how, law firms used to be positioned too. They would grow around the courthouse,
Mhm.
especially in the smaller jurisdictions though too. It's the courthouse is here and all the law firms were kind of positioned right around there so they could have their people to run over and file whatever needed to be filed.
No, it's true. And the people who did that job, they knew everyone in the clerk's office. They knew all the mechanics of how everything worked. They had the relationships when they needed them, and they showed up 1 minute before the door was going to be locked to get themselves in there to get something's file stamped. And we just don't have those same kinds of people with those same kind of relationships because we rely so heavily on technology, which is great, which is really effective, which is really efficient. But when it doesn't work, we don't have an easy way to revert back to kind of the old manual processes anymore. It's a challenge to do that. And you see that oftentimes when a company is experiencing a business interruption for whatever reason, a cyber attack, a weather event, whatever it may be, there's always those challenges. It takes a while to get up and running in a substitute way because you simply don't have the same people with the same training and the same skills in place that you did 20 years ago because things have just changed so much.
Yeah. And, and
Intelligence. Is Beasley utilizing AI with respect to claims or underwriting? Any proposals or plans to start using AI?
We are. So we're always looking at that, and we're doing that in a way that we feel is really safe and secure, right? So we are running some projects internally. Right now, there's 4 projects running. 2 of them are for claims. So I'm really proud of that. We're really excited to get those out to our claims team because we know they're not perfect today, but we're going to learn from the experience of people using them to build them, to make them stronger, to make that accuracy rate even better. So in the short term, they're something that we're really kind of developing. I wouldn't say that they're actively tools today. They're more in that development phase, but I'm really proud of what we're investing in and how we're using AI. So I think, it's interesting to me because I don't think using AI is going to give a company advantage over another. I think for companies that don't make any use of AI, they are the ones that will be disadvantaged, right? I think that most companies are going to find various ways to use AI to benefit their company in ways that are safe, that are smart. And for those companies that just refuse to move into that space, those are the companies that will lose. So I see it as something that it's a necessity we all have to do. And there is certainly growing pressure on law firms, for example, to do it. And it's how do you do it in a way that's safe, that's smart, that avoids the hallucinations, right? We've all read the cases about the law firm that, has a AI write a brief and it makes up case law that never existed, right? Those are hallucinations. How do you use AI in a way that's safe, right? To digest lots of information and create summaries that are accurate, that really, look at the key things you're looking at in a particular case, for example. And how do you use it in a way that's safe for legal research, for brief writing and things of that nature, to avoid the downfalls, the pitfalls of AI. So it's something that we are experimenting with in a way that I think is safe and smart at Beasley. But also I'll say, again, I'm really proud of my team in terms of being on the forefront of finding ways, creative ways, smart ways to use artificial intelligence. But we're also incredibly expert on keeping track of all the trends and sharing that knowledge with our brokers and our insureds on the risks of AI and how to avoid them, right? So it's easy for claims to always put up the stop sign, stop, danger, danger. But the question is, okay, here are the risks, and this is how you could avoid them, or this is how you can reduce them, or you can mitigate against them. And I'm really proud of my team for that thought expertise, that thought leadership that they're providing in terms of all that they're tracking and all that they're doing. Because I do think that's really a difference maker. We know companies are going to make use of AI, and we want them, when there are insureds, to do that in a way that's smart, that's sophisticated, and that really minimizes the risk of the downside of the negatives that do attach at times to AI.
You hit the nail. It's not losing the people power. Like that's with the hallucination example. It's a tool. It can't go unchecked. So AI is designed to give you an answer no matter what. That's why hallucinations happen, is because even when it can't come up with something, it'll still produce something for you. So it has to be just a tool. Don't lose the people power, so that it's at least checked and utilized properly.
Yeah, I've always viewed technology, automation, artificial intelligence, for me, all these things are great enablers, right? Because frankly, I think what a computer is good at doing is something that's repetitive, and that's a low-level, boring task that most human beings don't want to do. A human being doesn't want to do a low-level, boring, repetitive task day in and day out, but a computer is happy to do that, right? So to me, that enables my team to have more time to spend on things where they truly make a difference, right? Where they're having those calls with insureds and brokers, they're listening empathetically, they're giving the time to have difference-making service, they're thinking in a way that's bold, they're thinking in a way that's creative, they're coming up with new, novel solutions and ideas. To me, the things that I can get off their plate that are low-level, boring, repetitive exercises I'd rather see a computer do, gives them more time to do the things that a thinking, strategic, relationship building, trust building person does, right, in terms of interacting with other people. And so for me, I think there's a lot of excitement around it, because I see it as something that really enhances our ability to give more time to the difference-making activities, and to have a computer do the things that, frankly, a computer does better, because after a while, a human being gets so bored of a repetitive task, they find ways to cut corners or stop caring, and a computer is just going to keep doing that repetitive task over and over again, and you can measure the accuracy so easily with a computer as well.
Right. I mean, people make mistakes because we're people, and if it's a repetitive kind of input type task, but you're never going to be able to recreate the critical thinking and empathy, right? Like a computer can't do that. At least I don't think it can. Maybe the technology is further than I believe, but I don't. I think that you can't take the critical thinking and the strategic thinking that you need people and claims adjusters and attorneys and managers to do when they're evaluating and handling a claim. Like there's certain things, yes, a computer can do, but that strategy, you can't farm that out.
You can't, and a computer isn't going to build trust with a person, right? So for me, so much in terms of how we're able to effectively share our expertise is by having trustful relationships where insureds see how deeply we care about their matter and want to support them. And it's that type of relationship building, that trust building, that allows us then to have the best opportunity to share that expertise to support them in their journey on the claim. And that's something that you get through interactions as human beings, right? And for me, there's a convenience of a computer spitting out data, right? Because, I want a copy of this letter right away and a computer can spit that out. That's great. So I'm happy for a computer to do that, right? But when you want to have a call, you want someone to hear you.
Mm-hmm.
You want somebody to sit by you and help you solve your unique problem, support your company in getting back on its feet, whatever it may be. You want to know there's a person there, right? A person who's responding to you when you're speaking to them, who hears you and who comes up with different ideas, who stands beside you when you're doing a mock trial exercise and hearing what mock jurors are thinking of your case, right? Those are people interactions, those are human interactions, and that's where trust and relationships really matter. And so for me, I don't mind if the computers do those low-level tasks because it means my team of experts have more time to do the things that really make that difference, that really are the differentiators at the end of the day.
And in reality too, like those things take time to think about and process. And if you are taking up your time doing the lower level non-thinking tasks, is taking away from the time that you can utilize the brain power for those higher reaching items. I mean, it to have extra time to just think, because that's, look at all our jobs, we all need to think and use our brains, and to take away some of the stuff that takes away from that thinking time is very, very helpful, and it makes us more efficient and like better because you're not distracted at getting this other thing done that requires not much thought.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really exciting. I think it's the stuff that makes you get out of bed with a bounce in your step and look forward to going to work, because you're going to work with people that you like, you respect, you're going to be helping somebody, you're going to be strategizing, you're going to be building trust. Those are exciting things to do. Moving piece A to piece B over and over again is not exciting, right? That's not a reason why you get out of bed with a pep in your step, because, no one's looking forward to moving piece A to piece B over and over again, hundreds of times in a day, right? And that's why a computer is good to do that. And people are good to do the other parts, the thinking parts, the strategic parts, the relationship building parts of a job. And I think there's a lot of excitement to let technology enable our human teams to do the things that add the most value, that really do differentiate. And I am quite lucky because Beasley is a specialist insurer, right? So because we're specialists and we don't do personal lines and things of that nature, we have the ability to really build those relationships and really invest our time into solving these claims issues the best we can, because ultimately we don't get 100,000 dented fenders a month, we don't get 100,000 lost coats a month. So what we do isn't repetitive, it isn't routine, it's all really quite specialist. And we've done something since I've taken over the helm of the team I'm really proud of, because I think a lot of times when people talk about technology and computers coming in, they worry about, well, what are the entry-level roles? How do people who are new to the industry, new to the workforce, get an opportunity if we're going to take away kind of the roles that have historically been open for entry level? And so when I took the helm of the team, we created a very junior role on the team called claims technician. And what we decided to do was hire these folks in cohorts, in groups. We have them trained for 6 months centrally. They all work together with the centralized training. We give them a super strong foundation about insurance, our systems, the way we work at Beasley, our claims procedures, et cetera. And then we put them into their product teams. And so for the next 6 months, they have a dotted line back to the center to make sure they're continuing to learn, they're continuing to develop, that they're really being used as claims professionals and not as claims butlers, as I like to say. They're not fetching people coffee and picking up dry cleaning, right? They're really working on claims, and they're learning the ropes. And then from there, after that second 6-month trench, they're in those specialized product teams and they're really becoming product experts. And it's been a fantastic opportunity to grow junior talent, to give them that career opportunity into the team, to support them in growing and giving them a base, a foundation of expertise before they go into the product teams. And it's been a huge success. And it's something we're going to continue to do. And technology is not going to replace that, because what they're doing is thinking, it's strategic, it's relationship building. It's not just pushing paper around on a desk.
It's, you're almost pushing folks out of their comfort zone, right? Because I think some people some people might get comfortable pushing the paper across their desk or doing that, and because it's easy, right? It's easy, but you're kind of taking it away and be like, no, I know you can do more than this, and I'm going to help you do more, and I'm going to give you the tools that you need to do more, and you're going to be okay, and you're going to be better, and you're going to grow, and you're going to have more ability to grow here, because we're kind of just pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit to push it. I'm using push a lot, but it's
yeah, but no, it is. It's really giving people the support. And the tools, as you said, Megan, giving them the support and the tools to flourish, to be successful. And I think a lot of times it's not uncommon for companies across industries to bring in junior folks. Sometimes they invest in them, sometimes they don't. It could be very patchwork. It could depend what department you get assigned to, with things of that nature. And ultimately, some people, succeed and some people fail. And oftentimes the people who fail, it's because nobody ever gave them a support network. No one ever gave them the tools. They didn't give them the training. And so when I set this up, I set it up in a very specific way to ensure that we were giving people strong foundations, good tools. And for those that would make it, which would be most of them, great. There'd always be a few, it wasn't a fit. Maybe they don't really want to be in the insurance industry. Maybe they don't enjoy claims, whatever it is. That's okay. That's life. But we give people a really solid foundation and a good set of tools to build their opportunity to achieve the greatest level of success. And we've created different roles within the team, again, maintaining our non-hierarchical, mindset, but different roles to the team for them to develop over time, and to have a career path. And to me, that's really important. And I think ensuring that people have both a solid foundation and a clear opportunity for a career path is something that, I'm proud of creating within the claims remit at Beasley.
Well, I love it. And I think we could talk about it forever, but we are pretty much out of time. Like, I looked down at my clock and I'm like, oh my gosh, we are out of time. But I love what Beasley's doing with that. And I think it's utilizing AI in a very smart way and not cutting out jobs, but just increasing the productivity and the upward mobility of employees, so you can do more. But Beth, you've had such an amazing career, and you've done so much throughout your time, being so curious and so thoughtful. But I'm wondering, looking back to where you started and where you are now, what advice would you give young Beth?
I would say two things. One, take that uncomfortable leap, right? Do the thing that you think, I'm not sure I'm the right person to do this or have the right background to do it. I would say to young Beth, do it, right? Take the leap. You can do it. I think a lot of times we have a lot of boxes. I don't tick all the boxes, so we don't take the leap. And I think we should always take the leap, because there's so much in terms of skill set that don't fall into those tick boxes that ultimately build success. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing I would say is be the narrator of your own story. And I think young Beth allowed a lot of people to tell her story for her, and they use it then in their own way for their own benefit. And I share this advice with a lot of people when they ask me for career advice. And I think being the narrator of your own story, the author of your own story, is so important. You should tell your story for yourself. and be proud of that, and not let somebody hijack your story for themselves, because people will do that to you.
Yeah, and maybe take the call
Yeah.
before the third one.
Exactly. Good thing it's answered the third time, right?
Could you imagine? Like, I can't. I'm after getting to know you a little bit. I couldn't imagine you being an investment banker. You have way too much personality.
Well, I think I would have gotten bored of that job after a few years, because a lot of that, in terms of the legal department at an investment bank, is doing a lot of these FINRA hearings over and over and over again. And I imagine it becomes quite routine and not challenging after a period of time. And as somebody who likes to think of myself as a lifelong learner, who has this passion for curiosity and doing and learning new things, I don't think that would have satisfied me for the long term. I wouldn't have imagined myself in such a place 18 and a half years later, whereas here I am at Beasley, still learning, still growing, still developing, and still loving it every day.
I'm glad they kept calling.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And of course, for all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also find us on YouTube at Claims Never Sleep Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep Podcast, presented by Cruiser